Around my 39th birthday, we were living in survival mode. We were in a rut. Life was really hard and we spent most of our times in commutes with our kids in childcare. Fast forward 1 year to my 40th birthday and we were living mortgage-free in a big house, close to good schools and really tiny commutes with not much traffic. This is how we did it.
As two engineers, we love using processes. So when we weren't happy about where our lives were heading, we designed a process to help us decide what to do.
The first step in our journey was all about figuring out what we wanted our life to look like in 5 years' time. And we didn't mean what we wanted it to look like in 5 years' time as this huge, big, new success story, instant success, and we're the best ebook sellers on Amazon or something along those lines. We spent a lot of time figuring out what we wanted our life to look like on a day-to-day basis and what each week would look like, what the aspects of our lives were that we loved in this 5-year vision.
So that could be aspects like the ability to go and coach your kids' football team or sports team, having the ability to pick them up from school, drop them off and pick them up, have that afternoon available and not be stuck, having to finish work at midday just to meet, the school pickup times.
We didn't want to be spending as much time stuck in traffic or on the train, having long commutes. We also wanted to have more space, both inside and outside.
The other thing that we would like to have had was the Friday night crowds, having groups of friends around, having games nights or sessions with the other families and stuff to get to know them better and grow that community around us.
And so a really important aspect of that was that we all lived relatively close to each other because you didn't want to have to travel an hour or have a designated driver, etc. So it was about having a community where we could all live close.
And the kids could grow up together, knowing one another.
Another one was that we wanted to have more money to be able to travel and to have weekends away. We wanted to have
more disposable income,
spend less on our mortgage, and just really be able to spend money on the things that make life more enjoyable. It was quite a brainstorming exercise. And I think that the most important part of that brainstorming exercise was that we looked at both the push and the pull factors. So we looked at not only the things we didn't want, but also the things that we did want. So we didn't want long commutes. We did want to be able to pick the kids up after school. We didn't want to be working 50-hour weeks. We did want at least one of us to be able to work part-time. We didn't want to be paying a huge mortgage because we did want to be able to spend that money on travel. So I think an important part of that brainstorming process was spending quite a bit of time just imagining, not worrying about the how are we going to make that happen, because that's what we automatically do. We'll automatically think, but that'll never happen. And we just brainstormed what if, without poo-pooing all the ideas, because the most important thing in that whole process was that it helped us understand what was important for us.
What were my push-pull factors and what was Carly's push-pull factors and what we wanted together as a family.
So it was a really clarifying process in that then we knew, while for some people things like status and climbing the corporate ladder were important, we figured out that for us, that wasn't the important factor. But the most important part of this step in the process was that we figured out why we needed to change. Everyone dreams about, what if we made this huge change in our life, but they never take action. I think the number one reason we took action and succeeded was because we figured out pretty early on why we had to make this change and why it was so important. And then that was the biggest driver for us.
Yes, we could see, a couple of years from now, 5, 10, 15 years from now, we picture what our lives would have been like if we'd stuck in that situation and living the way we were living, where we'd be. And it was scary. It was not a pleasant place to be in.
And that was our driver, to take the really hard steps, because changing your life and changing your lifestyle is not an easy thing to do.
No, it was a big upheaval. It really was.
A worthwhile one.
But worthwhile, definitely. But it was hard. That initial step is hard to make.
The next step in the process was really optioneering, and so further brainstorming. Again, the really important part of this step was not poo-pooing ideas and poo-pooing options before we'd explored them. We went back to the whole concept that comes originally from Edward de Bono, where he talks about his 6 coloured hats, which are all your different thinking type processes. If you've ever studied it at school or anything, you may remember that one of the thinking processes is the green hat. And the green hat is the creative thinking, coming up with options type of thinking process. And the whole process of thinking about, oh, that won't work because of this, that, and this, is a different coloured hat. It's the black hat. And you do need to do the black hat thinking, but you do it a long time after you've got lots and lots and lots of options from the green hat. We did a lot of green hat thinking, and anytime one of us would go, oh, but that won't work, the other one would say, no black hat thinking. Let's just think of all the crazy ideas that we possibly can, and we'll black hat them later. We then knew the things we wanted to go to and the things we wanted to go away from, and we came up with lots of options.
Yeah, we had options for us, for our case, moving away, moving closer to grandparents.
Moving like a sea change type of thing. So moving away out of the metropolitan area.
Or in some cases, actually staying in the metropolitan area, going closer into town, so the commuting was shorter, a smaller place, and also we considered even moving further out. So commutes were longer, but we had a bigger house and a bigger backyard that we could have afforded.
We also considered other things like moving to smaller cities nearby.
That were more affordable.
That were more affordable, but that we weren't that far away from our friends that we'd established with where we were when we were living in Sydney, Australia. And then we also looked at, could we even stay where we were but demolish our house, rebuild? Could we potentially try and fix a lot of those push-pull things on an individual basis rather than changing our whole lifestyle? We spent a lot of time coming up with a lot of different options.
For each one of our long list of options, we then looked at the feasibility of each one. If we took, for example, if we stayed in the metro area but moved further out to get that bigger internal and external space in the house, then that would potentially result in longer commutes. Does that then mean that one of us has to then drop out of potentially our career for a couple of years to then pick up the kids from school and get them dropped off in the mornings? Or the other option, if we stayed and rebuild the place that we were in, where would we live while the build was happening? Would that mean that we could even afford it? Would then have a mortgage, potential rent, build costs as well?
All at the same time.
All at the same time,
yeah,
exactly.
So it's a bit of affordability issue.
So, and then another option was, do we pack up and move further abroad, being just maybe into another city or, like we did, to another country? But are there opportunities for both? Could we both further our careers? Or would we move to a place where maybe one of us would advance and the other one would be kind of stuck?
And also, were we moving towards support? So were we moving towards family? And some cases where we were moving either abroad or to the country, we were moving towards grandparents. But we were also looking at options where we just moved to a smaller city that was slightly more affordable nearby. But in that case, we'd be starting again and not with any extra family support. So that wasn't necessarily as attractive. There was always trade-offs with every option.
Consistently just refer back to those push-pull factors to make sure that, if there were any trade-offs, what were we willing to accept?
Once we had narrowed down our long list to a bit more of a short list, we started doing some research. And this was a really important step. We started, taking trips to those areas or talking to people in those areas, finding out what life was like there and whether our dreams of being able to have a Friday night crowd, as well as picking our kids up from school at the same time as coaching their teams and things like that, was actually going to be a reality or a possibility in that space. But also whether we even just liked the vibe of the area.
One of the other things that I did, which might be uncomfortable for some, but I actually spoke to some of the local people and asked them, what sort of salaries would you need to earn in this area to live comfortably and have a relatively comfortable life with your family?
But I think the more people we were able to speak to about what life was really like in those areas, the more convincing it was, the more it helped us with our why. And the more it helped us with the final step of all. And that was the step to act. And that is obviously the scariest step of all, because you can research, you can brainstorm, you can optioneer everything. But when it becomes a bit of a reality and you act, it can be a super scary thing. I still remember in the space of sort of 3 to 4 months, once everything fell into place, we sold our house. We in auction, we moved everything into a big crate that was going on the ship to go overseas, etc. We got on the plane, and I remember as the plane was taking off, I don't know why it didn't feel real before that, but I remember that when the plane was taking off, I suddenly felt like, oh my goodness, this is real. And I was overcome with emotion and burst into tears just because it was like, whoa, what am I doing? So it is, even though I was certain in what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it, it was still a really big step. But if we hadn't taken that step, then all the steps before it were useless, were a waste of time, and they would just make us even less content with what we had, because we would just be sitting there going, oh, what if? The reality is, the biggest factor in whether you make that hard action at the end or not is whether or not you have a strong enough why. If you have a strong enough motivation and reason to change your life, then nothing is as scary as staying in the same pattern that you're already in. It's scary, but take that final step of making the big changes, and then you can change your whole life, your whole lifestyle in under a year.